Okay, so that's what happened. Let's talk about the hope. So
Yeah.
when all of this was happening, you're sick. Everybody's getting diagnosed with something in your family.
Yes.
And so you said we did intensives. We're doing marriage work and y'all were doing all these things. What was your hope coming back from Africa to the States to do the itineration? Now having all this information and all this research about what's going on in our marriage and our kids and our family and our system and our health, what did you hope would happen next?
I really hoped that now that we knew what we were dealing with on multiple levels, that we could get the help we needed, be resourced, put those things into practice, really rest, kind of have a restart. It's why I fought for us to have a sabbatical because we hadn't ever had one in 20 years of ministry. And I knew he needed one. I knew I needed one, kind of just a reset. And that we would be able to start out in health. I kind of started making the autism thing, neurodiversity, kind of putting that out there as like a fun and good thing, which it is, but coupled with abusive behaviors, um, traumatic things happening in extended family and in our own home. Um, it wasn't the fun thing I was painting it to be because the help wasn't being accepted and the humility to just learn new skills and try new ways of doing things, take on more responsibility, wasn't being accepted. It was still being put back on me. So at one point we were actually watching the one of your videos for autism and couples to watch. And I think it was Dan was talking about sticky notes, or one of you was talking about sticky notes. And so I was like, see, could we try that? Could we just try like sticky notes to remind you who to call and what to do that day? And he was like, sticky notes don't work for me. Sticky notes don't work for me. So it was hitting up against that it was like anything I do, it isn't helping this. This isn't just autism. There's lots of other things at play, character and a willingness and a humbleness and a spiritual life that I didn't see being played out the way that I expected or hoped or was shared. It was a lot of different things played into just knowing this isn't just autism. And I tell a lot of the women that I work with, like for most probably all of these women, the autism doesn't matter. Even some of the narcissistic traits or some of the abusive behaviors, we're all like, it's fine, whatever, but fix it, get some help, do something with it. I haven't heard yet. And like you were saying, like I haven't heard any of them yet saying, oh, I heard it was autism, I was out. That is definitely not the attitude of these women. They're like, oh, good, we can get help. We can put resources in place. We can do something. So I think that was the hope. Like, we can do something with this. But then when that ball is dropped again and again and again, it really gets discouraging to think that, wait a second, this is still all me fighting to make it okay, to do the sticky notes, to find the videos, to learn the skills. And the toll that's being taken, the mental load that it takes to do that is just as much as not knowing what it is.
Yeah. And so getting the help, the right help, because some of
Mm-hmm.
the wrong help might be a Christian counselor or pastor who doesn't understand the neurodiversity and wants to make
Mm-hmm.
everything sin or make everything disability. So one person's accommodating for the other person.
Yep.
Um,
We
and
experienced both of those.
which usually makes it worse.
Yep.
It adds insult to injury and usually adds
Yep.
more mental emotional load to the non-autistic spouse.
Right. Because it equips the person who's causing harm, regardless of why. It gives them, now they have the therapy words. Now they have the books to back them up. Now they have scripture to back them up. It just equips them and makes it worse without that humbleness to say, wow, this is me.
Okay, so through all of this, there wasn't really a checking up on, even when some people started to know because of the itineration sermon that went out there that was
Mm-hmm.
oversharing a lot of information. So you're not being checked up on. You're kind of getting worse. You get to a point, you have this hope. There's intensives, new information. It sounds like maybe some weaponized therapy words start
Yep.
happening instead of doing things to change. So you go to a point you wanted to separate. Like, so we've talked on the show before that sometimes a therapeutic separation can be helpful. Calm down the central nervous system, calm down trauma, stop the bleeding, take a break so that when we're together, we can be intentional. We can try to joy build. We can try to solve problems, when
Mhm.
everybody's central nervous system is dysregulated. So you tried a therapeutic separation. How did that work?
Um, we tried to have kind of a document that um, laid out expectations, what we were both hoping to work on, what we both hoped would happen, expectations, that kind of thing. Um, but just the document itself was pulling teeth to get it even finished, because of the defensiveness. It took all the therapy time, all the counseling hours went towards defensiveness. Well, if she would just hear me, if she would just listen to what I'm saying, if she would just see my expectation or my perspective, if she would just see that I really love her and that I'm doing all of that, kept us from actually getting to the heart of the document and the reason to get that therapeutic benefit of having a therapeutic separation. It felt like um, we were still going through words and back and forth with all the crazy emails and texts, and that's exhausting. Any of the women or couples that are listening that are going through some kind of therapeutic work, including a document like that or a separation, or it's exhausting. It's a lot of work. And if you have one of the two that seem to be fighting against the system, that seem to, they're stuck in their rightness. I had one counselor say he's still as stuck as in his rightness today as he was the first day I saw him. And that it's exhausting.
So I would imagine it's a little more complicated to be separated when you're in ministry.
Absolutely. Yep.
So what's that like? You're in ministry, you're still part of a ministry organization, and you're separated. And that generally in Christian circles, the big thing is never separate. You never separate. You always work it out. You always stay in the same bedroom. You stay in the same house. You do not leave. Separation is evil. Keep it together. People are watching, all of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I just imagine that would be more difficult in ministry.
It was very difficult because if you work at a bank, nobody really cares. It doesn't impact your job at all. But a marriage greatly impacts a ministry couple. And so, and then you have missions on top of it with the number of churches and pastors and supporters who genuinely love us and have been praying for us for years. They're very involved in our ministry. We were very open and involved through social media and my writing newsletters, very involved with the people who supported us. And now we had this huge thing blowing up under the surface that you don't just write in a newsletter, you don't just throw out there. So we had leadership involved, people we had to call. So not only are we trying to work things out together, we've got counselors involved and coaches involved and now leadership involved and our team leaders and just so many people involved, pastors, that alone is super stressful because I'm trying to express what's wrong without hurting someone's reputation or getting anybody in trouble or making anything bigger than it needed to be. So I'm cautiously asking for help, but yet needing somebody, praying for somebody, wishing somebody would just say, "What is going on? What is going on?" And make us as a couple more important than the ministry. When instead it was like, well, if you guys could just keep living together, then you can just keep itinerating and nobody really needs to know. And at that point I was like, no, I can't keep living in the same space as him. Things have happened, things have been said, things have been done that need great repair. And until that repair happens, that's not possible. And so by saying that, by needing that, it really put an end to what they were able to do and offer to us as a ministry couple. And choices were given to us. But again, I was so done being the one making the decisions all the time. I needed him to step up and pray, ask God, what is his next step? What does this look like for him? And he kept pushing and pushing and pushing, wanting me to make that decision for him. And I couldn't make that decision for him. I knew for me, I had to step out of the way. So he did resign from our organization and has started a new career, and all of that's been fine. It's just, I still feel a call to ministry. I still am ordained. At one point, I even asked, am I still an ordained minister worth looking out for and protecting and watching over and comforting and ministering to, or am I just his wife? And I had somebody honestly say, right now in this situation, you're the wife. I'm like, wow, really stinks to be the wife because it feels like all the care and comfort's coming around him. And I just felt I'm the one over here having to make these hard decisions about real character and the reality, 100% commitment to the truth. And it was very isolating.
Because I think, like you said, you work at the bank and this happens. It's different than when you're working in ministry and you have to walk that fine line of who can we trust and who do we say what to, because that could end our ministry, quote, our job and career. If we're actually honest about what's happening and the help that we need, that could actually end our ministry and career.
Yep.
And that's so
Health
unfair.
Insurance and I mean, just all of life, our girls' schooling, what was available to us, my network, my friends, the people that I'd spent 23 years working alongside, all of a sudden it's all in jeopardy.
I want to talk about a phrase that is very triggering for both you and I. I have heard it a bazillion times. Usually, if I've been an advocate for someone who's been in an abusive situation, when a pastor, board member, elder says, there's two sides of every story. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I've actually heard that a lot in the last 6 months. Yeah, there's two sides to every story. Each side has their own perspective. We need to make sure we hear both of you. Both of you are hurting, on and on. Lots of different variations of that phrase.
Marriage is 50-50.
Marriage is 50-50, takes two to tango. I've heard them all. And at one point, just in the last little bit, and just another step of healing for me, was I have an answer for that now. It's actually not. When there's abusive behavior involved, it's not 50-50. It's just not. We weren't having 50-50 marriage problems. We were having abuse, character, behavior problems that were all of his to own. I had to own that I'd enabled it, that I'd just tried to step in and do it all for so long. That was mine. But the actual problem, the abusive behavior, is not 50-50. There isn't two sides to that story. There just isn't. And if they would listen to the story that I'm telling them, even the story that he's saying publicly, you can tell it's not 50-50.
Yeah, because I was thinking back to, and I'll say this was a church in North Carolina, not my current church, but I was working with a woman who was in a situation of domestic violence, and the husband had friends who were on the board, who were in leadership, and things were so difficult for her. She got a restraining order, and two, I don't know if they're board members or elders, pressured her and pressured her and pressured her to drop the restraining order, because we need to be able to minister to both of you. We need to have both of you at church. This restraining order is keeping him from his children. This restraining order is keeping him from coming to church as a family, is coming to church as a family that's going to heal this marriage. And there was some egregious domestic violence at play. And when I would go to talk to the elders, I was like, okay, so if you want to minister to him, minister him off this campus. Go to lunch with him. Go to coffee with him. Call him. Invite him to men's Bible study when she's not here. Why do they both have to be on this campus to be ministered to? Her and the children. She has the restraining order. if we have to pick that only one person is allowed to be here at church, technically how a restraining order works is if she is here, he cannot be here. The restraining order has chosen for us that if her and the kids come, he must not be on property. And they thought that I was, quote, you're just taking sides. I'm like, well, right now the side of the law is he is not welcome on the campus and you are breaking the law if you allow him on the campus. And B, saying we have to minister to both of them like they both have to be here on present, sitting beside each other in church is not how this is going to get fixed. Some men need to sit to him and tell him how to treat his wife and to hold him accountable for the behaviors that are happening here, and to the point that a court has ordered he cannot be in so many yards of her. But that thinking, you have to be under the same roof. You have to be on the church. We have to minister to both because you both have there's two sides of every story. And when abuse is part of that story, I think that changes it.
It does. And I learned recently that someone said I'd said no to something, and I was like, I never said no to any kind of help, or I don't know what that means. In some thinking and asking some questions, I did say no to something, and it was just that, like coming and being together and in the same place so that leadership could talk with us. And I said no, but that was 3 weeks after I'd found out something pretty challenging that was happening behind the scenes in our marriage that I thought, of course I said no at that time. And they obviously weren't listening. They weren't understanding the impact of what was happening to even ask me to do that. So there's a lot of education, I think, that needs to happen, awareness raised, especially when it's a ministry couple. We have to do better.
Yeah, the system is broken. It needs to be changed. Because here we are. I mean, people do look up to ministry couples and missionary couples. So on the one hand, I get why you're living in a fishbowl, but at the other hand, if you're not really honest and truthful about what's going on, that's a form of hypocrisy that we're asking ministry couples to live under. You as ministers are telling us, the congregants or people on the mission field, to be open and vulnerable and allow Jesus in, and God loves brokenness and he's attracted to brokenness and he can heal brokenness. And you have a broken marriage and you're not allowed to talk about it because you have to appear strong, or somehow that hurts the ministry organization or the church or something at large, when I would think, people who are in ministry and missions, you're going to be under more spiritual warfare and more attack and having more against you by definition of what you're doing as a vocation. So why wouldn't we think that there might be some problems happening in ministry? And I don't think it's helpful to stand up and hold hands, pretend like everything's going well when it's not, because when that's the image and then there's a divorce, it's like, what happened? Like, what? Wait a minute. They were the perfect couple. They were the perfect mission couple. What happened here? That's so devastating to those listening and following when they think everything looked so well and picture perfect. And then, it takes people along for a ride too when that happens. So we've got to rethink the way we do things, and especially with ministry and missionary families. There's a couple of things I want to add as we're kind of wrapping up today. Now, the denomination that I like to say fellowship, but it's a denomination that we belong to, for many, many years, it was adultery only. And that was like it. That was the only biblical one. And then it was, if the person who's not a believer wants to let you leave, then go to that, because that was biblical. And then they added domestic violence, physical violence as a reason. And I want to actually share, because the reason our denomination put that up there was like, because it's a sin against the temple. So if there's domestic violence, then it's sin against the body. The temple is the Christ, the dwelling place of Christ. So they added that one. But I want to challenge churches to use the definition that the Office on Violence Against Women, this is coming from the U.S. Department of Justice website. This is how our federal government describes domestic violence. And so we're gonna talk about this, because we know through brain scans and neuroscience that actually emotional, psychological, spiritual, narcissistic, gaslighting, abuse can be more harmful than even physical violence. Now, physical violence, it could end a person's life, and so it's more dangerous in that situation. But as far as the effects of
Yep.
it on a person, on your heart, mind, and soul. These other forms that are insidious and invisible have great effects. So the federal government says domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power or control over another intimate partner. And that can look really different in a church
Yes, it
ministry
can.
situation. Domestic violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, psychological, or technological, because we've had people cut people off of bank accounts and
Yep.
limit their technology access.
Yep.
Any action or threat of an action or intimidation of a pattern of coercive behavior that influences another person that's an intimate partner relationship. This can include, but not limited to, intimidating, manipulating, humiliating, isolating, frightening, terrorizing, coercing, threatening, blaming, falsely blaming, hurt, injuring, or wounding someone. So it's not even the doing of something, it's the threat of, if you
Yeah.
don't do this, I will tell. If you don't participate in this, then I will. If there is some kind of coercion there and some kind of consequence, which is different than a boundary. I get this all
Yep.
the time, sometimes from the men. Well, she's an ultimatum. So an ultimatum and boundaries are different. A boundary is what I'm willing to do and not willing to do, what I'm willing to invest in and not invest in, and what I'm willing to allow to happen to my person. So when you set your boundaries, it was, I am no longer willing to invest myself in the ministry to the point of physical deterioration. I am no
100%.
longer willing to
Yep.
take on the mental load of the ministry and the family.
Yep.
I am no longer willing to allow certain things, parts of the stories that haven't been talked about today.
Mhm.
I'm no longer willing to allow that to happen, and I'm going to live in a separate space. None of those were coercions or ultimatums. They
Right.
were what I'm going to do and not do and allow to my person and allow to my space. That's what a boundary is. And sometimes when you put a boundary on someone who's been abusive or coercive, it might escalate because people
Yep.
don't like to be boundaried. And people who have
Yep.
been using control do not like it if some measure of control has stopped. So I think it's really important for our listeners, if you're in an abusive situation of any kind, you can expect when you set a boundary, there will be escalation. Your boundaries do not change their behavior, and you
Yep.
need to be in contact with someone. So I want to talk now about what you do as we're kind of wrapping this up.
Hmm.
Really briefly, kind of talk about some of the ministry that you do with women who are in difficult situations and how they can find you.
Yeah. So many women, especially women in ministry, we don't have words for all of that. All those things you just read, we don't have vocabulary for that. We don't know what coercive control is. We feel something's off, but we don't necessarily know the words for the things or even how to set boundaries, what to do with all of that. So I love helping women actually just put data on the table in front of them about what they're going through, giving them vocabulary and words for what they're experiencing. Because how do you ask for help? How do you know what's really wrong until you start to look at it and really dig into it? So I love helping women do that, deciding, do I stay in this? How long do I persevere in this? How long do I keep praying and hoping and trying and doing all the things? And at what point is it time to go? Is it time to let go? I don't encourage women one way or the other. It is a very challenging place to be, and just equipping them, coaching them, helping them through that. I love working with women that are impacted by neurodiversity, moms with kids on the spectrum, wives that are in neurodiverse marriages, women that are on the spectrum themselves. I really love working with them. So, what I do doesn't have just to do with women that are in abusive situations, but I do absolutely have a heart for that, especially for women that are in ministry, because putting words to what you're seeing and experiencing and feeling can be terrifying in itself. We don't like to call it those things in Christian settings, but then that setting the boundaries that it can escalate. It did escalate in my situation. And it got physical in a certain situation that it had never gotten physical before. So it does happen. Um, And women have to be aware of what can happen and they need support. They need a healing team. I had multiple people around me helping me, speaking truth into the situation and giving me the courage to say no and to actually do that full stop that God was asking of me.
So a lot of different things. If you're looking for coaching, if you're in ministry and just like work-life balance,
Yeah.
marriage stuff, not managing, but working with families who have neurodiversity in their family on the mission field. Then if you're a wife who is trying to determine or discern, when's enough and what do I do? How do I set boundaries? And then women who are neurodivergent, who are maybe on ministry or mission field, and they're like, oh, this is a lot of executive function stuff for me to do. And they're, seeking some help. There's a bunch of different ways that I hear that you're helping women. And I'm so excited about that. And so I also want to say, just because someone's divorced doesn't mean the hand of God or call of God is off of their life. And so I know that's been another part of your story. And I apologize on behalf of the church for saying that.
Podcast, Stephanie.
That's a whole nother podcast. Now, for our Catholic friends, I feel this is really important because Jenilee and I are both Protestant, and I know things work a little bit different in Catholicism. But I want to say to you, I asked the person if I was allowed to say this, but I now know of 2 situations where an annulment has been granted on the basis of Canon 1095, 3, and there's a little degree mark, incapacity to assume the essential obligations of marriage on the part of the person. So if a spouse is on the spectrum and they are unwilling to learn and unwilling to be what in the Catholic Church and canon are the basic requirements of being a godly husband, there are now 2 precedents, one in New England and one in the Southeast, where an annulment was granted because the neurodivergent husband would not step up and do the basic functions of being a Christian man that the church believes are just basic foundations. And that's super important because from what I understand with Catholicism, even adultery might not be a way to get out of a marriage or have a marriage annulled. But if there's consistent not following through, emotional support, can't resolve conflict, isn't being a spiritual leader, there is now precedent for you. And so if you feel stuck and trapped because you don't understand Dr. Stephanie, you don't understand Reverend Jenilee, that's not how it works. I'm just telling you, there's 2 precedents now of annulment for what Jenilee has just described, that has been granted. It took 2 years in one case and 4 years in the other case. But just out there, I want you to hear, if you're feeling trapped and that you don't feel like you can do anything, I just want you to know that information today. Well, Jenilee, thank you for being on the show. Did you give us your website yet?
I didn't. It is Jenilee, Jenilee, Rachel.com. So they can contact me there, or Facebook, Instagram. I'm pretty much Jenilee Rachel everywhere, probably the only one out there. So you'll find me.
And when you go to her website, sometimes you have groups, and there might be a group. By the time this airs, there might be a different group out there. Well, thank you so much for being here on the show. And as I like to remind everyone, there is hope for your future, and you're not alone on your journey.